When we think about serial killers, we think about how someone could become such a monster. We look at their past and present. People such as John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer, and Richard Ramirez were all terrible people who committed crimes that were horrific. And most of these people lived lives parallel to their crimes. They lived alone, were rejected by society, had never been shown love and affection as a child, but most importantly of all, they themselves had been victims of abuse, both physical abuse and sexual abuse. This serves at the very least to explain their behavior. They were not evil, but people rather who made bad choices. They were made into monsters. But what happens when someone who lives a normal life, had a normal childhood, commits crimes of this nature? Are they truly evil? That is how many people would describe the man I will cover today, Dennis Rader. Dennis Rader, also known as BTK, short for Bind, Torture, Kill, would kill 10 people between 1974 and 1991 in Wichita, Kansas. A reason as to why Dennis Rader would capture the attention of the entire nation would be that on the outside he seemed to be another working class man who was trying to provide for his family. He seemed like a regular guy. He had a normal childhood. It wasn't perfect, but nobody's childhood is. He would also graduate from college, get married to Paula Dietz, have 2 children together, a daughter and a son. His daughter described their life as normal, and that her childhood and family can best be described as a normal American family. Ever since he was a young boy, Dennis had weird sexual fantasies. He liked the feeling of pain. He liked experiencing it. He would tie up his arms and neck and also spank himself while masturbating. He then realized that he liked watching it done to other people more than he liked it being done to himself. However, that fetish would soon transition into him getting sexual satisfaction from torturing animals. He enjoyed killing, strangling, and hanging small pets, like cats, dogs, or birds. But one day, watching animals being tortured wasn't enough either, so he needed something more extreme. He started by looking into women's bedrooms while they were undressing, a peeping Tom basically. He would also torture himself while cross-dressing. He would choke himself with ropes while wearing women's clothing and women's underwear. However, just like any other drug, sexual perversion is no different. He started not to get the same rush from watching women undress and torturing himself. His ultimate fantasy was to torture a woman with his bare hands and watch it. In his mind, that would bring him the ultimate sense of euphoria. Dennis Rader started his crime spree off strongly in 1974. He would first kill 4 members of the Otero family. He would kill Joseph, Julie, Joseph Jr., and Josephine. Dennis would break into the family's house, bind them all using ropes, and then strangle each one of them to death. BTK would strangle both parents and Joseph. He would grab a rope and hang Josephine. Authorities would find semen near the body of Josephine. The bodies were later discovered by other children of the Otero family who were at school at the time of the murders. Dennis would later admit that he chose his victims at random. However, he targeted whoever he thought would be the easiest to kill. Between 1974 and 1977, Dennis Rader would kill 3 more separate individuals. He would kill Catherine Bright by stabbing her 3 times. All Dennis brought him were 2 pistols, one he was carrying and a .22 in its holster. Before killing her, he stalked her. Catherine managed to fight back and call 911, but she would ultimately bleed to death. Shirley Relford was killed a few months later. He would strangle her to death with a rope. Next, he would strangle Nancy Jo Fox with a belt. He killed her in December of 1977, then would not kill again for another 8 years. An important note is that there is one surviving victim of BTK. Catherine Bright had a brother, Kevin Bright. He was present when Dennis attacked him and his sister. Dennis would shoot Kevin twice in the face, but he managed to survive and escape in order to call for help. Unfortunately, he couldn't save his sister. Later, when Dennis was arrested, he would say, "If I had brought my stuff, Kevin would be dead. That's not a brag, that's just a fact." His next victim was Maureen Wallace Hedge. He would strangle her, but she was the first victim that he moved around. He would move her body to different places. He took her to his church, where he would take a picture of the body in various bondage positions. He would then strangle Vicky Ling Wigler with her own stockings. This was Dennis' quickest kill, as he killed her and left in under 5 minutes. His last known victim was Dolores Davis. He would break into her house hoping to find her daughter. However, she was the only one home. He would once again strangle her and then dump her body in a lake. While Dennis was committing these crimes, he was living a regular life. It was almost like he was 2 different people. For a while, he was able to rationalize in his mind who Dennis Rader was and who BTK was. Dennis Rader was the love of a father who took care of his family, was an active member of his church, gave up his time to teach Boy Scout missions as Club Scout leader, and seemed to be a normal man living a normal life. Even in his professional life, Dennis would work as a census officer, installing ADT alarm systems which were in high demand due to the BTK killings. Little did anyone know that the man who was responsible for the killings was installing the alarms. He was also part of law enforcement, as he would become a dog catcher and compliance officer in Park City. He was able to present himself as Dennis Rader, but on the inside he knew he was BTK. The reason he did this, according to psychologists, was to distance himself from the crime itself. He didn't kill the Otero family, BTK killed the Otero family. He would also use coded language to refer to as a codex. These were words that were meant to cover up what he was actually doing. For example, he named his penis Sparky, and whenever he had an orgasm, he would refer to it as the Big G. All of his victims were known as projects. When he killed Maureen Hedge, he called it Project Cookie, and the killings are called hits. At first, he referred to his alter persona not as BTK but as the Minotaur. Whenever he became the Minotaur, he called it going dark, and the force that compelled him to kill people and become BTK, well, he called that Factor X. He would use these words when he would communicate with law enforcement. From 1991 to 2005, he didn't kill anyone, but he still took part in weird sexual fantasies. He took part in autoerotic asphyxiation. He would wear women's clothing while also wearing women's masks. Psychologically, he would also pretend to be his victims. Throughout all this, he would hide his true intentions so well, he was just seen as another regular family man living in Wichita, Kansas, so the BT case went cold. During 1974, Dennis would communicate with different media outlets and authorities. 9 months after killing the Oteros, Dennis would tell the Wichita Eagle to go to the library and open up a specific book that contained a letter detailing who he was. The letter was very detailed in describing the killings, which led authorities to believe that he was actually the killer. The most important part was the ending. Dennis wrote, "P.S. Since sex criminals do not change their MO, or by nature cannot do so, I will not change mine. The code word for me will be bind them, torture them, kill them. BTK, you see he's at it again," which is how he got the name BTK. In 1978, after killing Nancy Fox, he sent a message to a local media station saying, "How many more do I have to kill to get my name in the paper or get national attention?" This shows that part of the thrill Dennis got from killing was the intention that came from it. The only person who received a message from BTK that was not a media outlet or a victim was Anna Williams. BTK had chosen her as his next victim, but she came home later than expected. BTK got tired of waiting for her. He would steal her scarf and later mail it back to her with a note, "Be glad you weren't here, because I was." The BT case ended up going cold in 2004. The reason for this was that on the 30th anniversary of the BTK killings, a local newspaper in Wichita published a newspaper article saying that BTK was either dead, old, or in prison for another crime. This enraged Dennis because something he never got was the attention. Dennis craved attention from the authorities. He very badly wanted people to know his name, but more importantly, he wanted to be feared. He wanted people to believe he was still alive and at any moment BTK could strike again. The Wichita Eagle, which published the article, received in the mail Wiki Regular's driver's license and a crime scene photos that Dennis had taken. This was not the only time this would happen. The Wichita Police Department would receive a package at a time. It contained Nancy Fox's driver's license. This wouldn't be the only time BTK and the authorities would communicate. BTK and the police would communicate with each other a total of 11 times. On one specific occasion, BTK asked officers if he could send them a floppy disk without it being traced. Officers said they couldn't trace a floppy disk. The reality was they could. They just lied to him. BTK sent them a floppy disk. After a few minutes, the officers were able to chase the floppy disk to St. Lutheran Church, where it was created by someone named Dennis. After 30 years, BTK was unmasked as Dennis Rader.
I need to ask you, sure, you lied. How did you lie?
Because I was trying to catch you.
I lied to you because I was trying to catch you. And he was incredulous to the fact that I wanted this to end.
Say who you are. You're BTK.
1974 was the year Dennis claimed his first victim. After 31 years, he was caught. In December of 2005, he would be arrested and brought into trial for the crimes that he committed. While the floppy disk was the biggest piece of evidence police had, they also used DNA evidence that BTK had left behind at the scene of the crime, such as sweat and semen. They used that DNA and matched it to his daughter Terry Dawson's DNA, and it was a close match. Someone related to her was BTK. The DNA proved it. Soon the public would know that the lovable family man people knew as Dennis Rader was BTK. In the first few days of being arrested, Dennis Rader would plead not guilty. However, by the time he was in court, he would change his plea to guilty. He would go into detail about the 10 killings and confess to each one of them. To many in the courtroom, it seemed like Dennis liked describing the events. On the last day of trial, victims and victims' family members would make statements. Afterwards, Dennis Rader would give his last remarks. He would go on a 30-minute rant in which he vaguely apologized to the victims. But his last known remarks would be special, because they would show the world who Dennis Rader really was. He was not a family man, or a thoughtful churchgoer, or a community member, but a sadistic psychopath who showed no remorse for what he did. He was not a smart or clever criminal. He was just a man who lacked empathy, and did unspeakable horrors to his victims. Dennis would be sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences, where he spends most of his time in solitary confinement, alone and by himself, just like how most people felt when they were locked in a room with BTK. And as always, thank you for watching.